Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, so on today's episode of Shooting It Raw, I'm very excited because I have Louise. Now, should I call you, is it Farnay, or how do I say your last name?
Yes. Farnay.
Farnay, okay. When, Louise, when you sent me the set of images of your recent work, I was just blown away. So good, so good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so just because this is a podcast and people can't necessarily see, how would you describe the image that you sent? That we're going to discuss is of you signing your painting.
Well, I try to. I have a very close connection with the ocean. So I was brought up on the beach, and it's kind of it's my salvation and my place to go and rejuvenate and relax and just exercise and find myself and meditate and float. And I used to do a lot of diving too. I still swim regularly, but it's just that connection with the water that I want people to connect with and just find the beauty and the sensuality of the connection we have with the ocean. And so I've been painting solo females painting under the water, and express that beautiful sensuality and freedom that we feel when we're underwater. So I'm doing it in a hyper-realism way with my technique, and which I'd never done before, and I've just basically taught myself this technique. So I do see that each one is improving in technique, as I think I've done 7 of them now. Yeah, I'm about to start my 8th, and it will be my biggest ever. It'll be 2 meters by 180.
Wow! So I get this message, this email with the photo, and basically Louise is sitting or crouching down on the floor, I guess, in a studio or in a room, on a kind of a slight pedestal is her painting, which is very large, or large enough. I mean, how large is that painting?
That one was called Exhale, and it's about 125 by 90.
It's basically almost a square shape, in the photograph at least, and the top third or the top half of the image is like a blue sky, so very nice blue shape. And then half of the image is this weird warp of light and everything, basically looking from underneath the surface of the water, because it's like the original view is of, I don't know if the female is naked or not, but it's just very sensuous, very nice curves and lines with, the sort of dark hair flowing in the water. And her arm is kind of to the side, and then there's just the flow of her leg. And what's really arresting is the sun's impression of the shadows and everything on her leg. I mean, it's such an arresting image. And when I saw it, my reaction was visceral. I was so excited by it. I'm responding to the photograph, and the photograph has this really powerful painting in it, and there's you signing it. And so together, I just think that was such a great place to start the conversation. So
Thanks. I found this picture, and my mother had just passed away. I found this picture of this girl, and she had this amazing refraction of light on her bum. And I just thought, wow, look at that. I thought, I want to paint that. And I thought to myself, I'm going to use this to help me, bury myself in something, to not think about the grief I was going through, to basically use my art as my tool to help me get through the beginning of the grief of losing my mum. And I became really interested in the refraction and the light and that weightlessness and the sensuality and the beauty of water, over accentuating body form a little bit, and playing with the light and reflection, refraction, and distortion. So that's how they've all evolved. And yeah, the one you looked at was my 3rd one, called Exhale. And it wasn't until I was onto about the 5th painting, and I saw them all hanging in an exhibition in Hong Kong, that I realised they were part of my grieving process, and they were the various stages I was going through, me subconsciously without even realising what I'd been doing for the last nearly a year. Yeah, a year painting those.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, beautiful, beautiful process for me, and sharing that was quite personal, but people have really appreciated it and see the emotion in my work of what I was going through.
So this is coming out of a sense of grief and a sense of loss, and also processing what's happening. And yet, looking at these images, they're so alive, and the color is just so vivid. And like it was so powerful. When I saw this, I was just amazed, because in a way that painting to me could really only exist. I don't know, maybe not, maybe I'm completely wrong, and you tell me if I'm completely on crack.
Okay.
But it kind of exists in a world where it's also shaped by photography, because in a way it's like a photograph. It's such a, you can see it as a photograph, but then when it's a painting, it becomes so much more, I don't know, vivid.
I kind of like to create this outer worldly connection, because it is entering another dimension, going underwater. But yeah, I want that outer worldly feeling and escape. And one of my paintings I called Escape, actually. That disconnection with the human world, and you go underwater and it's just another world, because all you hear is bubbles and a bit of movement, and it's just. So I'm trying to capture all of that in my work, along with trying to replicate my photographic reference, because I obviously need that. A lot of people ask me if I'm using reference, but of course I need reference because of that movement of the water and all the bubbles and the hair and that weightlessness of the arm, perhaps, or the leg.
And really, how could a person imagine those reflections on the leg like that? To, you know what I mean? Like, how could a painter imagine that kind of light and reflection and intensity without it being photographic? I
certainly need reference. Yeah.
So was the original image basically framed like this, or did you kind of shift the perspective?
The one you're talking about, the one called Exhale, which I was signing, I basically tried to replicate the photograph, and that's pretty much how it was. I may have made the legs slightly longer to give it that more foreshortening and over accentuate, but otherwise it was pretty much as was. I really struggled with the leg. It's weird. I struggled with the very dark area on the outer thigh, where that beautiful bum curve is. But once I added this really deep blue and green, it totally connected the whole painting together, because it was looking a bit flat, so dark. But I thought, oh my God, why don't I add a bit of colour to connect with the water? And then it just went, wow. And for me, it really popped out and went, that's it.
So how about you talk about how we met? Because that's kind of funny.
Oh my God. Well, back in Hong Kong. I left Hong Kong 5 years ago, and I guess I may have met you 8 years ago or 7. And out of the blue, I can't remember which device it came in through, but I received a message from you, because you'd noticed that I'm a body painter along with face painting and hair, makeup and styling. And you asked me to do something for the shark protection.
Yeah, shark rescue.
What was it? Shark rescue.
Yeah.
And you asked me to do some body painting on your body. You wanted a shark.
Well, the logo.
Fin. The logo. That's right. You wanted the logo on your body. And so we connected that way, and I said, sure, come up to my apartment and I'll paint you.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
That was really funny. I do. I'll post it with this with this podcast, so people can get some context. I was running Shark Rescue, which is a marine conservation organization, and I wanted to do a kind of a raise awareness fundraiser, and there was a race going on in Hong Kong called Moon Trekker. And hopefully I'll get the guy who runs Moontracker onto the podcast, because he also does crazy, interesting stuff. Yeah, so I was going to do this race, and I wanted you to paint the logo on my chest, and I didn't know who you were.
That's right.
So I came to your apartment the day of the race. You painted the logo on my chest, and then I did the race. It was October, so it got quite cold. I got quite cold at the top of Lantau Peak.
Did it stay on or rub off?
No, it stayed on the whole way. It stayed on the whole way. And you did such a great job.
Because I use either water-based paint or a grease-proof paint.
Yeah.
And that's probably better for swimming if you don't rub too hard.
Yeah.
Here you are, some stranger walking to my apartment and ripping his top off and says, "Paint me."
Yeah.
With pleasure. Luckily, you're not too hairy.
Yeah, wow, that was kind of cool about how we met, and it's always a bit of a peripheral thing because you make art and you do creative stuff, and I'm always aware and sensitive of people around that. And then it's interesting how your path gave rise to these paintings. Now, would you describe the composition, color, all that stuff to be Australian in any way?
Oh God, it's so reminiscent of our beautiful coastline. Western Australia has the most beautiful turquoise and emerald green coloured waters. It's so clear you can see your feet right down at the bottom there. Oh, it's paradise. So for me, that's been my favourite part about Western Australia is our coastline, and never get tired of it and never get tired of swimming. It's my go-to. It's my place to recover and rejuvenate and relax and release and find myself again.
So, speaking of sharks and shark rescue, any fears of being in the water out there with sharks? Because the tasty morsels of meat, basically. Even though I know the biology of why sharks really have no interest in eating people, but is there that nagging feeling when you go in the water?
You know, I admit I used to swim straight out from the coast about 200 metres to get that real connection and feeling of aloneness and, you know, that connection of it's just me in the ocean. But I have to admit nowadays I swim more along the coast. We have got some shark nets up in some beaches, but I don't still use those. I just swim.
Sure.
I feel that I'm so connected. I feel protected. I'm not the least bit worried. But the chances are so slim, more likely to get hit by a car, really.
Well, I'll give you some more factoids about shark attacks, only because shark rescue was my obsession for several years. So one of them is you're more likely to die from falling coconuts. So when people are afraid of sharks, it's like, okay. Or vending machines. Vending machines kill more people than sharks do.
What?
Yeah, more people die from vending machine accidents than from sharks.
How what? The machine collapses?
Falls on them, whatever. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
That's a trivial fact, but funny.
Yeah, that's that's me in a nutshell. Trivial fact and kind of funny. Well, I mean, maybe not funny, but trivial fact. Okay, so describe your history of. So did you study painting?
I first studied graphic design when I was 16. I managed to get expelled from school, which was great because I knew I wanted to head towards the arts. So I worked all summer on my portfolio to get into graphic design. There was 800 applicants and I was one of 60 they accepted. I was totally relieved. So I got my graphic design diploma and then I worked in advertising for a while. And 10 years later, because I was so articulate and detailed in my work, I used to freelance in London, illustration and design. I decided I needed to study fine art. So I came back to Australia and started studying. And I got my I actually didn't finish it, but I did 2 years out of 3 of fine art diploma.
So let's just think about, because one of the people I had, basically the first podcast I had, or recording I had, was with my daughter, who's 8 years old. Yeah. And she's articulate and she knows how to express herself well. And so for me, it's interesting to kind of get a window into her mind to understand what's her relationship to, if there is a relationship, to using a camera to communicate some kind of internal vision or impulse. How would you describe your maturation in terms of your creative process?
So it's a very slow process. I don't know, I guess my technique, which I've taught myself, is improving on each one, and they're becoming even more lifelike. It is an emotional process, though, because I'm putting my heart and soul and all my energy in, exhausting my eyes at the same time with the focus required.
So how many hours would you say, you said it's about, how many hours to make a painting?
You know, I keep thinking, I'm going to start a timesheet, but when I'm painting, I'm thinking about other things as well, and so I'm stopping and starting all the time because my head's all over the place.
For sure.
I guess I have a little ADD or whatever it is.
No, you don't. You're a human being. Don't say that. You're just a human being. I'm gonna sit for 100 hours painting without thinking of anything else.
I do stop and start, and I get up and walk away, but sometimes I sit there for an hour or two and I have like, oh my God, I've spent 2 hours or 3 hours just on that tiny section on the arm. But yeah, it's a very slow process, and I think it may take about 100 hours, but I haven't written it down because, yeah, it's that emotion and that freedom of expression. I want people to bring my art into their home, to have that, to connect and relax and connect again with nature. I mean, the world has been moving too fast for too long, so that when people come home, they're bloody exhausted, and I want to create that sanctuary within their home, you know, so water provides that, and for me, that's my outlet.
If I come into your house, what do I see?
You'll see a lot of my art. People say they feel happy when they see my art, and they get goosebumps, and they become very moved and emotional. I create a great calm with my work when people come into my home. And I have like a beautiful view, so it's very peaceful. They feel at peace. They're quite overwhelmed by my work.
Clearly you're hitting a nerve. Do you ever teach or not really?
I do. I run workshops. I had 2 workshops last week. I mean, I could teach this hyper-realistic technique, but people have to have that discipline. I'm really disciplined. It takes a lot to sit there and say, right, I'm going to spend, to get this looking realistic, I need to spend 100 hours to devote that. I don't think a lot of people would do that.
Now let's compare that then with the act of photography, right? One of the guys, he makes images where the exposure is several hours long sometimes, or several minutes long, which people don't normally associate with making an image, right? So
yeah,
what's your relationship to the immediacy of photography versus, you know, you paint bodies, you paint canvases, these things take time.
I often have deadlines for exhibitions, and I wonder if I'd be able to get it finished in time, because I know how many hours it's going to take. Yeah, photography is so immediate, and especially these girls that I paint are referenced off a photograph. Like the girl diving under the water, she's just got millions of grey, soft grey, white, and hues of blue bubbles following her. It's called Escape, and you can view that on my website. But that is really like a fast frame. I mean, these slow photographies where they do over a few hours, it's not what I can relate to in my work, because mine is like a snapshot, like the bubbles are frozen still in time, and yes, so the water is caught in motion, but it's still, so it's quite different. I mean, it is photography, but I'm working off a photograph.
What connection do you make to, I mean, you've done graphic design and advertising, you've done commercial work, right?
Boring. There was no creative license at all, and the clients thought they knew best, and they had no idea about space and type and design and layouts and blah, blah, blah.
When was the last time you had a rush of excitement? Because, okay, so the paintings take a long time to make. So when was the last time you had something like that? Or is it, for you, unnecessary?
The process is frustrating, and I ask myself every time, what am I doing to myself? I think I'm driving myself crazy. Why am I doing this?
And you're hurting yourself.
what am I trying to prove to myself? But then I don't see it while I'm painting it, but when I walk away and I come back and I go, oh my God, it's happening. It's starting to come together. I can see form. You know, I'm always like so critical, but it's like, oh my God, I've got to spend more hours on that jawline because it's just not looking how I want it to look. But I get that satisfaction when I think, oh my God, it is coming together. And the biggest satisfaction, I have to say, is when I put the shadow of the figure of the woman on the bottom of the sand, and then I get that different dimension of depth, and it's like, oh my God, now you can see it's sunny day, there's the shadow cast on the bottom of the sand, or the refraction of the water and the light. And it's like, oh my God, it is coming together. I've just got to keep going. So I think my last one has really, really resonated with a lot of people, and it sold before I even managed to exhibit it.
Oh, wow.
In fact, there was the two hyperrealisms that I exhibited. They both sold before the show opened.
Can you describe the image for the people who can't see?
It's of a girl. I've just done from the hip up, and she's leaning back on the water under the water. She's wearing a red bikini top, and her neck is beautifully arched, and her back is arched back. So her shoulder and left arm are very limp in the water, and then her hair is very, soft and floating, and she's blowing these massive bubbles up through to the surface of the water. So she's got that beautiful feeling of aloneness, but at total peace. And it's very sensual, this last painting. And she feels beautifully at peace. So that's why I called it Solitude.
Mm-hmm. When was a time when an image that you created, either by photography or painting or whatever, that got huge recognition, that was really like, that's massive?
The biggest impact that I probably had on my viewers was my very first hyperrealism painting. And then I realized it's like, wow, I really enjoyed that process, the result. And then I just started looking for more images and to paint. So the first one was probably the biggest wow for me.
Somebody who's younger, who's kind of, or not even younger, somebody who on their journey hasn't gone through the experiences that you have in terms of aesthetics and creating art and all this stuff. What is the advice, or what would you like to share with that human being?
I know when I did this interview for a magazine up in China, it was an international arts magazine. Somehow that online interview filtered down to a girl. I don't actually know what country she was in, but she'd been suffering with suicide because she'd been abused. And she wrote to me and thanked us for the article and the interview. And she said, I feel like I have a reason to live now, because it's like the 8th time she was writing or was in hospital trying to commit suicide. She was a teenager. And that really struck a beautiful chord with me, that I can mentor and support young people and, give them guidance, and using art as a process for healing trauma and anxiety and abuse is the most beautiful human connection we have. And it doesn't matter what it looks like in the end, it's the process of doing it and the emotion that you can pour into it. And that's what really makes art personal and unique.
Louise, thank you so much. Oh, I really appreciate. I love that we reconnected. I love the work, and if I can help people see your work, absolutely. That's why I am here for. So that's really. Yeah. Thank you so much.